Hi everyone. We don't normally do this. You're more used to seeing us as part of the Sunday teaching or hosting team, or midweek with Unpacked Lunch, or Think Differently Thursday, or Fridays with Fennin. But we wanted to do something together today. Maybe this is Unpacked Think with Fenning. But what we want to do is we want to convey to you the next stage of our journey to meeting together in person as church, and we wanted to come together and do that together.
Yeah, absolutely. No one could have predicted this past year and what it's been like. And it's certainly been a journey, as Helen said. But we just want to take a moment also to recognize and celebrate what God's been doing in our church over this past year, in this unprecedented year. And God really has continued to move. I'm just looking at the moment, and I think our reach has been wider and our engagement has arguably been higher than it perhaps has ever been before in many different ways. Just thinking that we've seen 14 people come to faith in this past year whilst everything's been online, where we haven't been able to meet physically. We've still been able to baptize people, and just thinking of those moments of like the hamper campaign we put on, being able to give away 110 hampers to families in need was just amazing. And just thinking around this Sunday as well, whereby we've been able to launch groups once more and seeing 180 people sign up in that first 24 hours has just been really, really encouraging. God's continued to move, and it really has been that the church hasn't been closed, but really it's just moved online.
Yeah, and actually we're really excited and looking forward to what God's going to do with us next. If you've been part of the church for a while, you'll know that we have often adapted, should I say, and changed our model while still kind of holding on to the mission. And so in a sense, nothing deviates from wanting to help people find and follow Jesus.
Yeah, definitely. And so, Steve, you shared with the church recently that the staff and the elders had really prayed into and reached a decision about what we would look like when we come back together again. So maybe you could just remind us of what you said, because pre-lockdown, each of us led a different location at the Forge, but that's going to change, isn't it, on our return to meeting back in person?
Yeah, it is. And what I've recently shared is that for several reasons that we've decided to return not as three separate locations, but actually all coming together in one location. We were stretched with three locations. We were stretched financially with manpower and resources. And whilst actually we hadn't anticipated changing that, what lockdown has done, it's provided us with this opportunity to reflect and reset. And it feels right in coming back together again to regroup, to physically do that all together, as well as still keeping our online service. I mean, the other reason is that we have no idea how many folks will feel safe and ready to meet in person again. We know that some are really enjoying online church in their pajamas and want to continue in that way. And some have felt very disconnected and might not even return for now. And all these things just suggest that coming together in one place makes the most sense.
Mm. And so, Jonny, I know that you've been tasked with working with a team to seek out a venue, which I guess has been a pretty difficult task. You must have had to be really mindful of location and bearing in mind, just like for us, where our different locations had previously been. You must have had to look at capacity. I mean, what exactly were the criteria that you were working with in looking for a new venue?
Yeah, so there's pretty much every criteria that you could possibly imagine. And we kind of came to the conclusion that there really wasn't the perfect venue at all. Like when you look at all the things that we do, we've actually been really blessed to be able to have three different locations that allow us to do what we do in Thurston Eye and Debenham. And so obviously location was the big one. We wanted it to be relatively central to where we've been meeting so far. And so I can remember seeing this big map of, seeing where everyone currently lives around Suffolk and different villages where people come from and so forth. Trying to find somewhere that was relatively central was a real challenge. Capacity was obviously the real big one as well, but not just capacity to see how many people we could fit in, but also that would facilitate having 5 different congregations happening at once, with our adults, youth, and our 3 kids congregations as well on a Sunday. Things like storage and whether we would be able to ease the burden on setup and pack down and things like that as well as actually being able to do what we want to be able to do in terms of gathering with a stage and space, and being able to have creative services in the way that we have done in the past. So there's been a whole bunch of criteria. We looked around leasing, and we looked around renting, and we looked around converting, and everything from the broadest spectrum you can imagine. Certainly was a tricky task.
It does sound like quite a task. Now, I've lived in mid Suffolk most of my life, and there aren't a whole load of venues that are springing to mind right now that actually fit all of that criteria that you're talking about. So I'm guessing that the difficulty hasn't been deciding which one to use, but actually just finding somewhere that does actually fit the criteria. Why don't you just, like, so people know, tell us about, places that you found and places that you explored?
Yeah, well, certainly initially we were really keen to think around finding somewhere new for all of us and finding somewhere central. And so some of those places were places like the Regal in Stowmarket, which would have been a great, a venue that got multiple screens going up at the moment. Unfortunately, there was just the issue of, okay, well, what do we do for kids and youth? Because the reality is that probably wouldn't be an ideal venue for all of the congregations that we have on a Sunday. Red House Farm in Forward Green, we've made contact to, but that was quickly, just not going to be an option, because they have their own things that they look to do over the weekend with residentials and different things like that. And we also looked at different high schools as well, which have been an option really since we went to Hartismere and Stow Upland was the big one that we really looked into initially, but it just didn't have the capacity. And so with every venue we looked at, and so those were 3, but there are others as well, with every venue that we looked at, there were just real clear stopping points in terms of the criteria we were looking at, where we just thought, this just isn't going to work.
Oh, Stow Upland would have been fun. That was my old high school. But it sounds like none of those options that you've explored quite intensely were feasible, which I believe has led you to look at the locations that we'd previously hired.
Yeah, we looked at the venues that we've used in with Hartismere School, and Thurston with Thurston Community College, and Debenham as well. And Debenham was kind of the clear standout because it was the most central. Initially, we didn't really look at it all that much, as I said, because we wanted to have a look at alternative venues that we hadn't been to before, but also it wasn't available initially, and also it'd been used as a vaccine centre and the rest of it, so it just kind of wasn't an option. But then we got an email through sort of saying, actually, we'd love to welcome you back at when those when it's not a vaccination centre anymore. One of the things that it really kind of came out of it was that in a time of such uncertainty, when we didn't know what was next, actually that was a real place of what we knew and things like that. So we have decided, I guess is the big announcement that I'm making, so if you've zoned out from what we're saying, this is the time to tune back in. We've decided that going forward from the end of June till at least the end of this year, that we'll be meeting back as a church at Debenham Community Centre.
So this is going to be met with mixed feelings. I think for some this is going to be really exciting, particularly the whole idea of actually coming back together, and for some people that's going to be somewhere comfortable and convenient that they know, but maybe others are going to feel the opposite. Maybe it's going to feel like a long way to travel, or it's inconvenient. So Steve, how would you answer those that perhaps are not that enamoured with this decision?
Sure. Firstly, I guess I just have to say that I understand completely. I mean, one of the reasons for going for locations is that so that it would be closer to where people lived, and so they would feel much more part of that community. So we recognise that this isn't ideal, which is exactly why we want to kind of run this through till the end of the year. Basically, we've just done short-term planning. To plan beyond that at the moment, I just think is unwise. And so we are talking about coming together once a month at the end of June, July and August, and then going weekly after that until Christmas. And basically, as staff and elders and partnering with you as the church, we want to keep seeking God over what's next, over kind of the medium to longer term. And so we're really asking people to choose to approach this really positively. This isn't a step back. This is not going back to how it used to be. If we do that, it brings a real negative sense. And so actually what we're doing is we're taking a step forward as a church in pulling the whole church together to be able to rebuild after what has been a very difficult year.
Definitely. And I've been in and around the Forge most of its life. I knew you, Steve, 30 years ago when you had this vision for church. I've seen our church change and adapt, which I think is a huge strength of our church. But I've always known that part of your vision for the church was not necessarily to be one big, large gathering, but to be lots of smaller locations in and around Suffolk. So I guess that leaves me with this question about, where does that now sit with you, Steve? How do you personally, as our senior leader, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I feel confused. I really did feel and believe that God had spoken to me on my sabbatical of seeing 6 to 8 locations in growing villages across Suffolk. I really felt it was between 6 and 8, and it depended on our faith and how much we wanted to go for it. And so suddenly, coming out the other side of COVID, with that kind of at the moment just not being possible, I don't know what I'm supposed to make with it, other than I just have to hold it lightly. Because if God still wants that for us as a church, that can still happen, and new doors will open, or it will be viewed in a very different way. And if not, I just have to hold my hands up and say, actually, I got that one wrong. I really thought that was the case. And but I think the way that we're going is absolutely right for the time being. I just don't think we could make it work going for 3 locations again at the time being. So I think I just have to hold it lightly. But of course, the online church wasn't as prolific as it is now. And so, of course, whole of culture has changed. And so therefore, we have to adapt and change. And so maybe 6 to 8 locations will look very different, but that might still happen. I don't know. I just have to hold it lightly. It is confusing. How about you, Helen? Prior to lockdown, you were leading the location at Debenham. So how does it feel for you, us all gathering to meet there?
I'm really excited about it, and I want to maintain that excitement. And I think for me, that's going to come through thinking of it as a new start. So not thinking of it as going back to something that we were, but actually this is something new. This is us all coming together. I want to avoid language around this is how we did do it. And I just I'm really excited actually about this idea of drawing teams together, people that have been at other locations, but coming together and serving together and just building something new together. I was kind of thinking earlier as I was talking to someone about a time where there was a week we couldn't use Debenham, and so we went over to Thurston, and all 3 locations came together. We had our Sunday morning service and we had an encounter in the evening, and it was just brilliant to all be together. And so I'm looking forward to it. I really am. I think, we didn't split as a church. We didn't fall out. There was no division. The people that went to other locations or began there, it was because we love our church and we love what we do and we want to spread the message far and wide. And so actually, this idea of a bit of regrouping and gathering strength again all together, really, really excites me. But I guess I could throw the question back at you guys, because you've been leading locations at I and at Thurston. So how are you feeling about this thought of coming to Debenham?
Yeah, I guess I could jump in, because being part of this process of actually looking at different venues and locations, and it's definitely made me appreciate that this really isn't a step backwards. Being able to go through all of the different possibilities and looking at all the criteria right from the top down, as broadly as we possibly could initially, this decision has really come out of a whole bunch of thought and work from looking at everything. And so, to maybe quote a recent series, this really feels like a step in a direction, not just a destination. We still want to be moving forward. We still want to be working. We still want to be exploring and dreaming. And so, as someone who really has both, a foot in I's camp and leading I for a bit, and Thurston's as well in leading Thurston, I'm really excited about us being able to meet together. Just that feeling of that first Sunday in particular, where we get to see everybody, I'm really, really excited for.
Yeah, and for me, I think from the I congregation's perspective, for people who lived in I would still long for them to be involved in their own community, of course.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really important. I is not too far from Debenham, so that of course it will be more travelling, but it's not extensive travel. But also people can still watch online. They can still connect. Having Amber do Alpha that I've spoken about before, living in Holt in North Norfolk, and yet she is so engaged with the church because she watches the midweek, she watches the Sunday, she's part of a group, and so she is fully engaged and connected. And so I believe that that's possible, even for those that don't necessarily choose to travel every week. They can still stay really connected through the online church as well. Yeah.
Great. So in concluding, as folk absorb the news that for the rest of this year, once we meet, it's going to be in Debenham, what do you want church to do, you guys? Steve?
Yeah, certainly, yeah. I would just love for the church to keep praying that there will be a great sense of community and of celebration, as well as reflection, I think, for when we gather. We have to kind of get that balance right. But yeah, for people to pray that the mission of the church continues, that people will still grow deeper into their understanding and love for Jesus, and others will be introduced to Jesus, just to keep encouraging others too. So to pray, to stay connected, and to encourage each other, I think would be so good. Jonny, how about you?
Yeah, I think we'd love for people to get involved. So there'll be a whole bunch of different ways people can get involved in signing up for serving and things like that. And so just think back to your talk a little while ago, Steve, where you really call people to be, not just consumers, but actually contributors to what we're part of, to join in with a mission that we really believe that God's invited us to partner with him into. So we'd love people to get involved. And just again, on the back of our group's launch, to join the Emotionally Healthy Spirituality course, and to join one of those breakout groups as we meet together online as a whole church before we meet back physically. I just think would be a really great way for us to be able to start. And so Helen, give us the final word.
I think for me it would be to look beyond ourselves if we can, and to keep the thing. We are here. Church is about helping people to find and follow Jesus. Keep that in mind as we make yet another change. We've made lots of changes over the years. This is another one. Let's keep the thing.
It is. Okay. Helen and Jonny, thank you for being part of this, and for the rest of you for watching. Thank you so much. We love it that you're connected and that you're part of the Forge. I want you to encourage you to keep going with that. And look forward. There is a day coming when we will gather together again, not just at Jesus' return. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, everybody. You take care.
Bye.